The invisible assistant, the morning rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackwood. Enterprises, as Alina Rossetti adjusted her oversized sweater and pushed her thick-rimmed glasses up her nose. At 28, she had mastered the art of being unremarkable. Her honey-colored hair was perpetually pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her shapeless brown cardigan hung like a tent over her small frame. She clutched her leather portfolio against her chest as the elevator climbed to the 42nd floor, where Marcus Blackwood ruled his financial empire with an iron fist. For 3 years, she had been his personal assistant, anticipating his every need, managing his impossible schedule, and enduring his complete indifference to her existence. Marcus stood behind his mahogany desk, his tall frame impeccable in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his piercing blue eyes commanded attention from everyone except the woman who kept his life running smoothly. "Coffee?" he said without looking up from his computer screen. "And cancel my lunch with Patterson. The Singapore deal is falling apart." Elena set the steaming cup of coffee exactly 2 inches from his right elbow, just as he preferred. "Already rescheduled, sir. I've also prepared the revised contracts for the Henderson account and confirmed. Your flight to Boston tomorrow morning?" For a brief moment, Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Elena had an uncanny ability to stay ahead of his demands, solving problems before he even knew they existed. It should have impressed him, but instead it simply made her invisible furniture that happened to think. "The Morrison charity auction is tomorrow night," Elena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Hartwell called this morning. She's developed pneumonia and won't be able to attend." Marcus's jaw tightened. The annual Morrison Children's Hospital auction was one of the most prestigious social events in the city. Arriving alone would damage his carefully cultivated image and raise questions about his personal life that he preferred to avoid. "Find someone else," he said curtly, turning back to his screen. "Call the agency." Elena hesitated, twisting the pen in her hands. "The auction is tomorrow evening, sir. Most reputable escort services are already booked for such short notice and given the profile of the event." "Then figure it out," Marcus snapped, his patience wearing thin. "That's what I pay you for." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Elena had attended countless business functions, knew every major player in the city's financial district, understood the intricacies of corporate politics better than most executives. Yet Marcus had never seen her as anything more than an efficient machine. "Sir," she said softly, surprising herself with her boldness, "I could accompany you." Marcus finally looked up, his blue eyes scanning her appearance with barely concealed distaste. The thick glasses, the shapeless sweater, the complete absence of any fashion sense staking Alina Rossetti to the city's most elegant social event would be social suicide. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "Find someone appropriate." Heat flooded Elena's cheeks, but years of hiding her emotions kept her expression neutral. She had expected rejection, but the dismissive cruelty in his voice cut deeper than she had anticipated. As she turned to leave, Marcus called out, "And Alina, next time, think before you speak." That evening, Alina sat in her modest studio apartment, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Behind her thick glasses, her eyes were actually quite striking, a warm amber color with flecks of gold. Her bone structure was delicate, almost elegant, hidden beneath the shapeless clothes and severe hairstyle she had worn like armor for years. Her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague Jessica. "Heard about tomorrow night? If you change your mind about going, I know someone who could help you look absolutely stunning." Alina stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Tell me more." The transformation had begun. The transformation. Alina stood outside Look's beauty studio, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. Jessica's friend had managed to squeeze her in for an emergency appointment. But the elegant storefront with its gleaming windows and perfectly coiffed models in the advertisements made her feel like an imposter. "You must be Alina," a woman with striking silver hair and impeccable makeup approached her. "I'm Vivian Cross. Jessica told me you need a miracle in 12 hours. Alina nodded nervously, suddenly questioning her decision. "I'm not sure this is a good idea. I've never really done anything like this before. Vivian circled her slowly, her trained eyes seeing past the shapeless clothes and thick glasses. Honey, you have incredible bone structure. These clothes are doing you absolutely no favors. But underneath, she lifted Elena's chin gently. You're going to be stunning. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Vivienne's team worked with surgical precision, starting with Elena's hair. As the stylist carefully removed her ponytail, waves of honey-colored silk cascaded down her shoulders, catching the light like spun gold. We're going to add some subtle highlights, the colorist explained, sectioning off strands with expert precision. Nothing dramatic, just enough to bring out the warmth in your natural color. While her hair processed, Alina found herself in the chair of the studio's makeup artist, a young man named Felix, who studied her face like a painter approaching a blank canvas. Your skin is flawless, he murmured, applying a light foundation. And these eyes, why have you been hiding them? Behind those glasses? I need them to see, Alina protested weakly. We'll get you contacts, Vivian called from across the room. Trust me, darling, your eyes are your best feature. As Felix worked, Alina felt herself relaxing for the first time in years. The gentle brushes against her skin, the careful attention to detail it, was as if she was being painted back into existence after years of deliberate invisibility. Tell me about this event, Vivian said, settling into the chair beside her. What's the occasion? Lena hesitated, then found herself opening up to this stranger who seemed genuinely interested in her transformation. She told Vivian about Marcus, about the years of being overlooked, about his cruel rejection the day before. Men, Vivian scoffed. They can be so blind. But sometimes they need a shock to their system to see what's been right in front of them all along. When Felix finished with her makeup, Alina barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Her eyes, now free from the thick glasses and enhanced with perfectly applied shadow and liner, seemed to sparkle with new life. Her lips, painted in a soft rose shade, appeared fuller and more inviting, but it was the dress that completed the transformation. Vivian had somehow procured an elegant navy blue cocktail dress that hugged Elena's curves in all the right places. The fabric was luxurious, and the cut was sophisticated yet alluring. I can't afford this, Alina whispered, touching the silk reverently. Consider it an investment. Vivian smiled mysteriously. Something tells me this dress will pay for itself. As Alina slipped on the matching heels, surprisingly comfortable despite the height, she felt something shifting inside her. Confidence, long buried beneath years of self-doubt, began to emerge like a flower reaching for sunlight. The final touch was jewelry, simple pearl earrings, and a delicate silver necklace that drew attention to her graceful neck. When Alina looked in the full-length mirror, she gasped. The woman staring back at her was elegant, confident, and undeniably beautiful. But more than that, she looked like someone who belonged in Marcus Blackwood's world of power and privilege. Remember, Vivian said, adjusting Elena's hair one final time, confidence is your best accessory. You're not pretending to be someone. Else you're finally showing the world who you've always been underneath. As Alina walked toward the exit, her reflection caught in every mirror she passed. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't look away. Instead, she smiled at the woman she saw, strong, beautiful, and ready to claim her place in the world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. How did it go? Elena typed back. I don't think Marcus is going to recognize me. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and Alina felt as if she was seeing them for the first time. Tomorrow night, she would walk into that charity auction not as the invisible assistant, but as a woman who finally knew her worth. The transformation was complete, but the real challenge was just beginning. The revelation, the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, sparkled like a jeweled palace as Alina stepped through the entrance. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors, and the city's elite mingled in their finest attire. She took a deep breath, her newfound confidence wavering slightly as she searched the crowd for Marcus. He stood near the bar, checking his watch with obvious irritation. His black tuxedo was perfectly tailored, and his dark hair was styled to perfection. But Alina could see the tension in his shoulders. No doubt he was still scrambling to find an appropriate companion for the evening. As Alina approached, several heads turned. A distinguished gentleman with silver hair paused mid-conversation to watch her pass, and she caught two women whispering admiringly about her dress. The attention should have made her uncomfortable, but instead she felt a thrill of empowerment. "Excuse me," she said softly, appearing at Marcus's elbow. "Are you waiting for someone?" Marcus turned, his blue eyes scanning her face with the same dismissive glance he gave everyone who wasn't worth his time. But this time, his expression froze. His eyes widened slightly, and Alina watched his confusion, then recognition. Then complete shock flickered across his features. "Alina?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the orchestra's gentle melody. She smiled, enjoying the rare sight of Marcus Blackwood rendered speechless. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood. I hope you don't mind that I decided to attend after." How did you... you look?" Marcus struggled to form coherent sentences, something that had never happened in the 3 years she'd known him. His eyes traveled from her styled hair to her elegant dress, lingering on details he'd never noticed before: the graceful curve of her neck, the intelligence sparkling in her amber eyes, the confident way she carried herself. "Different?" Alina suggested, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "I suppose I clean up better than you expected." Before Marcus could respond, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Marcus, darling, there you are." Victoria Sterling, one of the city's most prominent socialites, glided toward them in a cloud of expensive perfume and designer silk. Her calculating eyes immediately fixed on Alina. With the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to cataloging potential threats. "And who is this lovely creature?" Victoria asked, her tone syrupy sweet, but with an underlying edge. "Victoria, I'd like you to meet Alina Rossetti," Marcus said, his voice stronger now, though still tinged with amazement. "Alina, this is Victoria." "Sterling. Rossetti," Victoria repeated, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising slightly. "Are you related to the European Rossettis? The banking family?" Alina's smile faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Distantly," she said, carefully, not wanting to elaborate on connections she'd spent years trying to escape. The conversation was interrupted by the evening's master of ceremonies announcing the start of the auction. As they found their assigned table, Alina was acutely aware of Marcus's eyes on her, pulled out her chair with unusual attentiveness, his fingers briefly brushing her shoulder as she sat down.
"Alina,"
he said quietly, leaning close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" she asked innocently, though her heart was racing at his proximity. "That you were... double quotes." He gestured helplessly. "This? Would it have mattered yesterday?" she asked pointedly. "Would you have seen me any differently if I'd worn a beautiful dress to bring you your morning coffee?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Marcus had no answer, because they both knew the truth. He wouldn't have noticed. He saw what he expected to see, nothing more. As the auction proceeded, Alina found herself engaged in animated conversations with their table mates. She spoke knowledgeably about art, quoted recent financial articles, and even shared a joke in perfect French with the ambassador's wife. Marcus watched in fascination as she effortlessly navigated the social dynamics he'd always found tedious. "You speak French?" he asked, during a brief lull in conversation. Among other languages, Alina replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Italian, Spanish, and some German. Languages were always important in my family." Each revelation was like a piece of a puzzle Marcus had never realized existed. How many lunches had he eaten while Alina sat at her desk, probably speaking multiple languages to international clients? How many social functions had he attended with vapid companions, while his brilliant assistant managed complex negotiations from behind her plain desk? When the orchestra began playing for dancing, Marcus surprised himself by standing and extending his hand. "Would you care to dance?" Alina looked up at him, and for a moment he saw vulnerability flicker in her eyes. Then she placed her hand in his, and they moved on to the dance floor. As they swayed to the music, Marcus felt the world shift around them. Alina fit perfectly in his arms, following his lead with natural grace. Her perfume was subtle and intoxicating, nothing like the overpowering fragrances his usual companions favored. "You're full of surprises tonight," he murmured against her ear. I'm the same person I've always been, Alina replied. Her voice steady despite the electricity she felt wherever he touched her. You're just seeing me for the first time. Around them other couples danced, but Marcus felt as if they were alone in the ballroom. He studied Elena's face. Memorizing details he'd somehow missed for 3 years, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled. The small freckle just above her left eyebrow, the elegant line of her jaw. I've been an idiot, he said suddenly. The admission torn from somewhere deep inside him. Alina looked up at him, surprised by his honesty. Yes, she agreed simply. You have been. As the song ended, Marcus didn't want to let her go. But the spell was broken by thunderous applause as the evening's final auction items sold for a record price. Around them, the crowd began to disperse, but Marcus and Alina remained on the dance floor, caught in a moment that would change everything. Between them, for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Blackwood truly saw Alina Rossetti, and he realized he never wanted to look away again. The past unveiled. The limousine ride back to Elena's apartment was filled with electric silence. Marcus sat closer than necessary, his eyes never leaving her face, as if he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but beneath the excitement lurked a growing dread she couldn't shake. Would you like to come up for coffee? She heard herself asking, as they pulled up to her modest building on the Upper West Side. Marcus nodded, dismissing his driver with a wave. As they climbed the narrow stairs to her third-floor apartment, Alina felt the weight of secrets pressing down on her shoulders. Tonight had been magical, but reality was about to intrude in the cruelest way possible. Her apartment was small but elegant, decorated with books in multiple languages and subtle touches that spoke of refined taste on a limited budget. Marcus noticed everything: the original artwork that was clearly expensive, the antique music box on her dresser, the photograph she quickly turned face down when she thought he wasn't looking. Alina, he said softly, catching her hand before she could hide the photo completely. Who are you really? She closed her eyes, knowing this moment had been inevitable. When she opened them again, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold: fear, raw and desperate. My real name is Alina Rossetti De Luca, she said quietly, sinking onto her small sofa. My family owns the Rossetti banking empire in Italy. 3 years ago I was supposed to marry Julian Ashford, heir to the Ashford shipping fortune. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Supposed to? Lena's hands trembled as she poured herself a glass of wine from the bottle on her coffee table. The marriage was arranged when I was 16. Julian is charming in public, but privately he's controlling, possessive, and has a violent temper. When I tried to break the engagement, he made it clear that wasn't an option. As you ran, Marcus said, understanding beginning to dawn. I disappeared 2 weeks before the wedding, changed my name, used fake credentials to get my job with you. I thought if I made myself invisible enough, became ordinary enough, they'd never find me. Her laugh was bitter. 3 years of hiding, and one night, in a beautiful dress, undoes everything. As if summoned by her words, there was a sharp knock at the door. Lena's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor as red wine spread like blood across the boards. Alina Rossetti De Luca, a crisp British voice called through the door. Open up. We know you're in there. Marcus moved protectively in front of her as Elena's face went white. Who is that? Detective James Morrison, she whispered. He works for my family. They found me. The knocking became more insistent. Miss De Luca, I have a warrant for your return to Italy. Please don't make this more difficult than necessary. A warrant? Marcus's voice was sharp with anger. What crime? Breach of contract, Elena said miserably. The marriage agreement included significant financial obligations. By running, I technically stole millions in dowry money and caused massive business deals to fall through. Marcus's mind raced through the legal implications. As powerful as he was in New York, international family law was a different beast entirely, especially when old European money was involved. The door burst open with a splintering crash. 3 men in expensive suits entered, led by a tall, thin man with cold gray eyes. Behind them stood a figure that made Elena's blood freeze: Julian Ashford himself, as devastatingly handsome and terrifyingly composed as ever. Hello, darling, Julian said, his cultured voice carrying undertones of menace. "You've led us quite a chase." Marcus stepped forward, his presence commanding even in this impossible situation. "I don't know who you think you are, but you've just broken into a private residence. I'm calling the police." Julian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Mr. Blackwood, isn't it? I've heard so much about Alina's employer. Tell me, did you know you've been harboring a fugitive?" "Lena hasn't committed any crime," Marcus said firmly. Alina could see the doubt creeping into his eyes as he processed the implications of what he'd just learned. "Breach of contract, theft by deception, international fraud," Detective Morrison recited. Pulling out an official-looking document, Miss DeLuca signed legally binding agreements. Her disappearance has cost both families considerable sums. Alina found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I won't go back. I won't marry him." Julian's mask of civility slipped for just a moment, revealing the cruel, calculating nature underneath. "You will, my dear. Your father's health has been declining since your disappearance. The stress of the business complications, the social embarrassment, Dr. Benedetti says another shock might kill him." The words hit Alina like physical blows. Her father, whom she loved despite his old-fashioned ways, was using his health to manipulate her return. Or perhaps Julian was lying, she couldn't tell anymore. "You have 24 hours to settle your affairs here," Morrison continued, his tone businesslike. "The family jet will be waiting at Teterboro tomorrow evening." Marcus watched helplessly. Alina seemed to crumble before his eyes. The confident, radiant woman from the ballroom was disappearing, replaced by someone trapped and terrified. "Alina," he said urgently as the men filed out, leaving only the threat of their return hanging in the air. "We can fight this. I have lawyers, connections against the combined power of two of Europe's oldest families." Alina shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Marcus, you don't understand. These people don't just have money. They have governments in their pockets, judges on their payroll. I knew this day would come eventually." She collapsed onto her sofa. Her transformation from the evening felt like a cruel joke. She was still wearing the beautiful dress, but now it felt like a costume she had no right to wear. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I should have stayed invisible." But as Marcus looked at her, Ellie realized something that surprised him. Tonight hadn't been about discovering a different Alina. It had been about finally seeing the real one. The woman who had been there all along, beneath the camouflage of ordinary clothes and thick glasses. And now that he'd found her, he wasn't about to let anyone take her away. The choice Alina stood at her apartment window the next morning, watching the city wake up below. She had barely slept, and Marcus had stayed the entire night, holding her as she alternated between tears and determination. His presence had been a comfort, but it couldn't change the impossible choice that lay before her. "My lawyers are reviewing the documents," Marcus said, ending a phone call with his legal team. "The contracts are legitimate, but there might be loopholes. Alina, you don't have to face this alone." Before she could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she hadn't seen in 3 years, her father's private line. "Papa," she answered, her voice barely a whisper. "Lena Mia." "Kara." Her father's voice was weak, older than she remembered. "Please, come home. This has gone on long enough." "Papa, are you really sick? Or is this another one of Julian's manipulations?" There was a long pause. "I am tired, Elena. Tired of the fighting, the scandal, the questions about where my daughter has gone, but I am not dying. Not yet." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by anger. "So Julian lied about Dr. Benedetti, Julian? Julian believes he loves you in his way. But love should not be a cage, should it?" Her father's voice carried a weight of regret that surprised her. "I have had 3 years to think about what I demanded of you. Perhaps I was wrong." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. "Papa, there is something you should know. The shipping merger with the Ashford Zit fell through 6 months after you left. Our family's reputation survived because people assumed we were the injured party." Marcus watched Elena's face transform as she listened to her father. Hope began to replace the despair that had haunted her eyes since last night. "What are you saying, Papa?" I am saying that perhaps my daughter's happiness is worth more than an old man's pride. But Alina, you must come home to end this properly. Face Julian, face the contracts, face our world one last time. Only then can you truly choose your own path. An hour later, Alina sat across from Victoria Sterling in an elegant cafe near Central Park. The socialite had been surprisingly easy to reach and even more surprisingly willing to meet. You want me to do what? Victoria asked, her perfectly manicured eyebrows rising. Help me end this, Alina said firmly. You know everyone in both American and European high society. You have influence with the financial press. Julian's reputation depends on maintaining his image as the perfect European aristocrat. Victoria studied Alina with new interest. And what makes you think I'd help Marcus Blackwood's secretary? Because I'm not just his secretary, Alina replied, meeting Victoria's gaze steadily. And because you've never liked Julian Ashford. I saw your face last night when his name came up. A slow smile spread across Victoria's lips. He tried to corner me at a party in Monaco 2 years ago, quite insistent when I declined his advances. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Did you have in mind? That evening the private dining room at Le Bernardin was set for 4. Julian arrived punctually as always, expecting a quiet dinner with Alina to discuss their future. Instead, he found Alina, Marcus, and Victoria Sterling waiting for him. What is this? Julian demanded, his composure slipping slightly. A business proposition, Alina said calmly. She had chosen to wear the navy dress from the auction armor for this final battle. Please sit down. Julian's eyes narrowed, but his upbringing wouldn't allow him to make a scene in such a public venue. He sat, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. You have 2 choices, Alina continued, sliding a folder across the table. Option 1, you release me from all contracts and obligations. Publicly announce that our engagement has been mutually dissolved and accept a settlement of $5 million from my personal trust fund. And option 2? Julian asked through gritted teeth. Victoria smiled sweetly, pulling out her phone. Option 2 involves me sharing some very interesting photos from that party in Monaco with certain members of the international press. Apparently, you're quite aggressive when you drink, Julian. Several witnesses were quite disturbed by your behavior. You wouldn't dare, Julian said, but Alina could see the fear creeping into his eyes. Try me, Victoria replied, her tone deadly sweet. I have nothing to lose and everything to gain from taking down a man who thinks he can force women into submission. Marcus leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of his business empire. I've also taken the liberty of having my security team investigate your business practices. It seems the Ashford Shipping Company has some very interesting ties to certain questionable cargo manifests. I'm sure the authorities would be fascinated to learn more. Alina watched as Julian's world crumbled around him. He had built his power on fear and manipulation, but faced with people who refused to be intimidated, he was revealed as nothing more than a petulant child. This is blackmail, he said desperately. This is justice, Alina corrected. Sign the papers, Julian. Take the money and disappear from my life forever. 20 minutes later, Julian Ashford walked out of the restaurant a free but defeated man. The contracts that had bound Alina for 3 years were dissolved, and she finally had legal proof of her freedom. I can't believe that worked, Alina said, sagging with relief. Never underestimate the power of well-connected women with a grudge. Victoria laughed. Besides, I've been looking for a reason to take that man down for years. As Victoria left them alone, Marcus turned to Alina, his expression serious. So what happens now? You're free to go anywhere, be anyone you want to be. Alina looked at him. This man who had finally learned to see her, who had fought for her freedom, even when he barely understood the stakes. I suppose I should start by giving my boss my 2 weeks' notice. Your boss might not accept your resignation, Marcus said, stepping closer. He's recently discovered that his assistant is the most remarkable woman he's ever met, and he's hoping she might consider a promotion. What kind of promotion? Lena asked, her heart racing as he reached up to cup her face. Partner, he said. Simply, in business, in life, in everything that matters. As Marcus kissed her under the soft lights of the restaurant, Elena realized that her transformation had never been about the dress or the makeup or the styled hair. It had been about finding the courage to stop hiding, to claim her place in the woe,